Welcome to another episode of Off-Road Legends. I'm Michael Van Runkle here for HotCars.com, and we usually focus on specifically iconic or successful off-roading vehicles in this series. But today, I want to focus on the future of off-roading, specifically Porsche's Mission E. I want to look at the future of off-roading as electric vehicles transform the entire automotive industry. Specifically, the Porsche Taycan Cross Turismo, which is sort of the most realistic version of the Mission E concept that Porsche first debuted in 2018. All the best details from concept cars don't really tend to make it to production. So when Porsche released the original Taycan, instead of the Mission E, renamed, changed a fair amount, lost the suicide doors, but retained the same performance goals, or at least close to the same performance goals. Some people were a little bit bummed because all of a sudden the Taycan was more of a sedan versus something that was potentially a little bit off-roady. Porsche started selling the Taycan in 2019. It's kind of amazing to think that they've been around for a few years, and more recently the Cross Turismo version. They all share a lot with the Audi platform mates, the eTron GT and RS eTron GT, but a Taycan starts at 120 grand and goes up to the Cross Turismo Turbo S at $221,000. But that gets you the dual motor all-wheel drive layout, the 800 volt architecture, a 0 to 60 time of 2.9 seconds, and the style points of knowing you're living up to more of the Mission E's original potential. Of course, we all know that the Tesla Model X and its Model Y little brother are more of minivans than real SUVs, so why not just go whole hog and do a station wagon like the Taycan Cross Turismo? Of course, we're talking about an electric car. We're talking about a Porsche, and we're talking about a sporty electric car that happens to be from Porsche. So let's be real, the Taycan Cross Turismo can't handle much more than a gravel road today. But you gotta remember, we're in the beginning of the electric age. The number one question I get asked the most by people is, what do you think of electric cars? And I always say, we're at the best age to be automotive fans and automotive journalists, because we get to see the best internal combustion, literally, ever, because internal combustion is coming to an end. Just look at the Corvette Z06. That's gonna have the best naturally aspirated V8 ever, because nothing's ever gonna come along that's going to be better. V8s are out the door. Meanwhile, electric cars are almost as good, if not better, than most internal combustion cars. And they're only going to get better from here. So the question is, where is Porsche gonna go after the Taycan Cross Turismo? In general, automakers want you to think that they are transitioning to electric cars because they're trying to be green and eco-conscious. But we all know the real reason, that their marketing efforts push sustainability. It's all about the money. Porsche has committed fully $7.4 billion to the electrification of its lineup. That's double the initial plan of $3.7 billion, and fully 620 million of those bucks went to the Mission E concept, which debuted with 600 horsepower from dual motors. Now you can get the Taycan in a whole number of options. Now you can get the base Taycan with a 469 horsepower single motor layout. It'll do 0 to 60 in 5.1 seconds on the way to a 134 mile per hour top speed. But it weighs a good amount over 5,000 pounds. And we know that off-roading, you really want to shave weight where possible. So the development of battery technology and motor technology are both going to be crucial to trying to establish a new era of electric off-roading. You're not going to see a Lucid Air Touring Edition anytime soon. Meanwhile, a company called Mullen is promising solid-state polymer batteries in the near future that could significantly trim poundage while also maintaining sustainability and being a little less fire-prone than today's current EVs. One detail that I do like about today's EVs is how much manufacturers are focusing on the noise. You don't have a gas engine with a sweet exhaust sound, So they're creating these sort of fake noises that are sort of real, that go alongside the of electric cars. And as a cyclist, I can always tell when there's a Taycan coming up behind me because it has the most futuristic sounding noise as it accelerates. More like a whoop, 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 whoop. I don't know how to do it, but it's definitely unique. Of course, you're wondering, what does that have to do with off-roading? Well, it's kind of cool to be able to go off-roading and listen to the silence around you, and all you've got is the sound of an electric drivetrain. The Taycan also has a 2-speed transmission as opposed to Tesla, which uses a single-speed system. And that's good for range and acceleration because you can have different gear ratios. But you should be wondering, how does that translate all of that instantaneously available torque to slippery dirt situations if we were talking about the Mission E going four-wheeling? Well, luckily, these electric cars have torque vectoring drivetrains that use computer sensors to tell when certain wheels are slipping. And by all accounts, they perform pretty well. I'd still like to see a locking differential, like on my Mitsubishi Montero directly behind me. But those computer systems can fake that if they so desire. They'll just basically lock up the motor so that both axles are sending equal power. And then they can also match the power output front and rear if they so desire. Whether they'll be able to do that on the fly or if we'll have buttons that say lock it all up on our electric off-roaders remains to be seen. It seems pretty likely that that would be the case. Meanwhile, right now, we know Porsche has air suspension on the Taycan Cross Turismo, which allows you to raise the ride height from 5 inches to 6.9 inches. That's not a ton, but we are, again, talking about a station wagon. Compared to a Bronco Sasquatch at 12.6 inches, that's not much. I don't even know what my Montero's ground clearance is, but hey, I got skid plates on there. Do we need skid plates to protect the batteries, which make up the entire bottom of most electric vehicles using a skateboard layout? Or are they going to be tough enough to withstand that kind of a beating when the time comes? We'll definitely need a lot more ground clearance, but hey, airbag suspension is pretty modular, and you should just be able to put bigger bags on and revise suspension components. Can't be that hard. And Porsche already has all the experience setting up air suspension systems for off-roading. Remember back in the mid-2000s, Porsche wanted to prove that the new Cayenne SUV that 911 fans absolutely hated was a tough enough SUV to take on legit off-roading challenges while also driving like a sports car on the pavement. So they sent the Cayenne to the Trans-Siberia Rally using the air suspension system that came standard on the Cayenne Turbo. That's a common mistake that people make. They think that, well, the Trans-Siberia must have had coil springs, right? But in fact, Porsche used that experience at Siberia to discover how to tune the air suspension system on the Cayenne. It was sort of the spiritual heritage of the 959 supercar, which evolved from the 959, which was sort of a basic 911 with all-wheel drive, into a legit supercar, but that still had 3 locking differentials, adjustable ride height, and various traction control settings. All of those technologies were super cutting edge in the 1980s, and then the Cayenne brought them to the masses in the mid-2000s and established an entire new era of SUVs that we still live in to this day. Although arguably, when the Macan was introduced, it transitioned to the era of crossovers. Now the Macan is going to be one of the first models that Porsche transitions to electric drivetrain. Whether they'll have an ICE and an electric drivetrain for sale at the same time remains to be seen. But for now, we know that the Boxster and Cayman sports cars and the Macan will be fully electric when it looks like the 911 will be only a hybrid powertrain. Porsche has already sent Macans to events like the Rebelle Rally, so will they send an electric Macan back to Dakar like the 959? Or maybe back to Trans-Siberia like the Cayenne? Who knows? It's unlikely they'll send a Taycan Cross Turismo, but hey, put some knobbies on it, get that air suspension a little jacked up, I think it would do all right. Of course, it would only do all right for so long because we're talking about electric vehicles. How are they going to charge electric race cars out in the middle of nowhere? At the moment, Formula E is in a closed environment. You're not going to have charging stations that can support race cars in the middle of nowhere in Baja. Or maybe you are, if Jeep's plan to put electric chargers at a bunch of trailheads in America pays off for the 4xe Wrangler. But fast charging and full throttle racing is really the worst thing you can do for an electric drivetrain. The battery experiences a lot of heat buildup, and then the ECUs will start throttling back what power delivery you do have available. So there are a lot of challenges to overcome, but racing series like Formula E and a variety of established automakers and electric vehicle startups are trying to get in on the action and figure out ways that they can make their products differentiated enough in terms of performance, which translate to speed and range, from their competition. Lucid spun off from Tesla when Peter Rawlinson, who was the chief engineer on the Model S, decided he could do it a little bit better than Elon. And then Mullen popped up in LA saying that they had a line on the newest battery technology. But there are other battery systems coming out too, like from Atlas, the pickup truck maker, that's promising a 0 to 100% charge for a 600-mile battery for a full-size pickup truck in under 15 minutes. We'll have to see it to believe it, of course, but if these promises of new technologies emerging in only the next few years can pay off, imagine where the Mission E could evolve to in, say, 10 or 15 years. Now seems like a great time for Porsche to take the rest of that $7.4 billion, maybe spend a little bit more, and pioneer a new kind of off-roading electric vehicle, a la the 959, as it did for supercars, and how the Cayenne transformed the SUV markets. Trust me, when that day comes, we'll be all over it at Hot Cars, and we'll probably be right here filming another episode of Off-Road Legends, where we can share everything we know and everything we think we know about how Porsche might be transforming the off-roading landscape. I hope you learned something watching this today, and as always, please subscribe to this channel and like this video on your way out. It'll help us beat the algorithm. Thanks.